Do you know the rules that lurk in the Midnight Academy? The real rules, not the ones written in the official student handbook. You don't know them? Then consider yourself fortunate for now. But once you hear this story, you too will know the rules. And once you know them, you can never forget. My name is Richard Gray. I've been working as a caretaker at Hartwell Academy for nearly 10 years now. Every summer, new students like yourself arrive and say the same thing. Just staying in my room doesn't sound like much of a challenge, but I know better. I know how this place operates, how it creeps into people's minds. Hartwell has the power to stir curiosity in even the most well-behaved children, especially at night. But remember this, after 9 p.m., the academy is no longer yours. From that hour onward, it belongs to them. Who are they? I call them the other inhabitants. I wish I could give you a simple explanation, but unfortunately, that's impossible. No one can. I've been here for nearly a decade and have pieced together what I can, but the truth? Hartwell doesn't like to reveal its secrets. If I had to guess, it has something to do with old beliefs. Things people believed in before science came along to comfort them. You've heard of the witching hour, haven't you? It's existed forever. An idea passed down through ancient folklore. The notion that certain hours of the night become thin. The wall between our world and something else grows thin, and the things on the other side slip through to ours. At Hartwell, that veil lifts between 9 p.m. and 3 a.m. Every summer, I tell the children this, and I always see it, that flicker of interest in their eyes. Curiosity. They want to know. They want to discover what really happens here when the lights go out. Some follow the rules without question, but others, they try to test them. They think they can outsmart the academy. They're wrong. If you leave your room during those hours, any number of things might happen. Let me start with the ballroom. It's on the first floor, at the eastern end of the building. A grand room, large enough to hold hundreds of people. I've been inside only once during the day. High ceilings, chandeliers, marble floors cracked with age. A place fit for royalty. But at night, the doors are locked. Heavy wooden doors with iron handles that won't budge no matter how hard you pull. Still, some children can't help themselves. They make their way there in the dead of night, creeping through the hallways, thinking they're clever. They stand before those massive doors and press their ears to the wood. That's when they hear it. Music. Old-fashioned music, the kind you'd hear at a royal ball. Strings and soft piano. There's laughter too. Faint but distinct voices drifting through the doors. The clink of glasses, the murmur of dancing couples, the sound of shoes gliding across marble. It sounds alive. It sounds like there's a party happening on the other side of those doors, even though we know they've been locked for decades. Some children get scared and run back to their rooms. Those are the smart ones. But others? They try the handles, pound on the doors, even attempt to pry them open with whatever they can find. No matter how hard they try, the doors won't open. And when they foolishly peer through the keyhole, they see nothing. Just darkness. An empty, hollow room. But come morning, there's always a mess waiting. I go to the ballroom every day before breakfast. Like clockwork, there's a stain on the stone floor just outside the doors. Deep red, seeping into the cracks. Wine, thick, syrupy wine. I quietly clean it up. Every morning, knowing I'll be doing the same thing again tomorrow. What does this stain mean? I don't know. But one thing is certain. Something continues every night on the other side of the ballroom. And the closer we get to those doors, the more it bleeds into our world, as if our curiosity is thinning the wall between the two worlds. So remember the first rule. After 9 p.m., never approach the ballroom. No matter if you hear music, no matter if you hear laughter, don't try the doors. Because if you could open those doors, the dancers on the other side might be looking for a new partner. And the second rule, have you heard about the red doors? Throughout Hartwell Academy, there are doors painted red scattered all over the building. During the day, they're ordinary doors. Nothing special, just plain wooden doors. But at night, things change. I first noticed the anomaly during my third year working here on an autumn night. The hallway lights had malfunctioned, and I was heading out with a flashlight to fix them. As the beam of light crawled across the walls, I spotted a red door that was slightly ajar. It had definitely been closed during the day. I make my rounds daily. I was certain of it. As I approached, cold air flowed out through the crack in the door, unusually cold for an October night. And mixed with that air was a sickly sweet smell. Strange, like rotting flowers mixed with human skin. I carefully pushed the door. It opened with a creaking sound. Inside was pitch black. When I aimed my flashlight, it was just an ordinary classroom. Desks and chairs arranged in neat rows. Nothing unusual. But the moment I turned off the light, I felt something moving behind me. When I turned around, another red door down the hallway was now completely open. I quickly left the area, without looking back, because from behind the open door, I began to hear a voice calling my name. From then on, I learned, never approach the red doors at night. Even if they appear to be open, never peek inside, because whatever is inside is staring back at you. The students seemed to sense it too. During my night rounds, when I walked the hallways, they would hurry past the red doors. No one spoke of it, but they instinctively sensed the danger. Last winter, one student broke the red door rule. A somewhat rebellious boy named Edward Harris. He snuck out of his dormitory in the middle of the night, determined to find out what lay beyond the red doors. The next morning, he was found in his room, lying in bed, appearing to sleep. But his face was deathly pale, his eyes wide open and unmoving. Blood trickled faintly from his mouth.
"Help me,"
he whispered repeatedly.
"From beyond the door. Still watching."
Edward was sent home a week later, but during that time, he never once slept. When night came, he would begin trembling and beg to be in a room without windows. On the morning he left, I spoke to him one last time. "What did you see?" Edward turned and looked at me as if he were seeing a ghost.
"Beyond the door. It wasn't a classroom. There was a long corridor. And the people there."
His voice trailed off, and he said nothing more. Don't forget the second rule. If you ever find yourself walking the hallways of Hartwell Academy at night, remember the red doors. Even if they appear to be open, never peek inside. What waits beyond those doors is never friendly. The third rule concerns an entity we simply call Lady. No one knows her real name anymore. There are no records of it either. However, her existence represents one of the most terrifying chapters in this school's history. Even after working as a caretaker for 20 years, my hands still tremble when I think of her. I've witnessed various supernatural phenomena during my night watch duties, but none as terrifying as her. Between 2 and 3 a.m., you might see a lone woman walking down the long corridor. From a distance, she appears almost alive. She has a graceful gait, neatly arranged hair, and wears a long dress. A beautiful woman, but you must never approach her. Never. I first saw her on an October night during my 5th year of employment. That night was particularly cold, and I was making rounds on the 3rd floor of the East Wing to check the heating. When I spotted a figure in the corridor, I initially thought it was a lost visitor. No student should be wandering around at this hour. "Excuse me, who might you be?" I called out in my professional tone as I approached. However, when I got within about 10 steps, my blood ran cold. I couldn't hear her footsteps. Even though she was walking on thick carpet, there was absolutely no sound. Moreover, there was something unnatural about her movement. She had a floating quality, as if her feet weren't touching the ground. As I drew closer, I noticed something even more abnormal. The air around her was slightly distorted. It was like air shimmering from heat waves, but such a thing shouldn't happen in what should have been a cold corridor. "Excuse me," I called out again, this time with wariness in my voice. She turned around. That moment still haunts my nightmares. Where her face should have been, there was a gaping black void. No eyes, no nose, no mouth, just nothingness. But it wasn't merely an empty cavity. I could see something writhing in the depths of that darkness. And from that void, a faint white mist rose, carrying the sickly sweet smell of rotting flowers. I was paralyzed with terror. I couldn't move or speak. My heart pounded violently, and cold sweat beaded on my palms. She continued to stare at me. No, more accurately, rather than staring, she seemed to be trying to absorb my existence. I felt as though my soul was being gradually drawn toward her. The corridor temperature dropped further. My breath became visible, and frost began forming on the window glass. Then, from where her mouth should have been, I heard a faint voice.
"Come with me."
The voice was a layering of multiple women's voices, echoing as if from the bottom of a deep well. I don't know how much time passed. It might have been minutes, or it might have been hours. Fear distorts one's sense of time. When I came to my senses, she had begun to fade gradually. Like mist scattered by wind, her figure slowly became transparent. But just before she completely disappeared, she reached out toward me again. In that instant, intense cold shot through my body, and my consciousness became hazy, and her final words echoed in my head.
"I will. Definitely. Come back."
When she completely vanished, I found myself kneeling on the cold corridor floor. I was drenched in cold sweat, and my hands wouldn't stop shaking. When I looked at my watch, it was past 3:15 a.m. Since that night, I began observing other phenomena occurring in the school more carefully, and I realized a terrifying truth. These phenomena were never independent occurrences. Lady's final words, "I will, definitely, come back," were deeply etched in my heart. Those words weren't mere threats. They indicated something much larger. Could it be that all the supernatural phenomena occurring in this school were moving towards some purpose? To verify this hypothesis, I decided to actively investigate other phenomena as well, and I decided to head to the servants' wing, which had been rumored about for years but never thoroughly investigated. 1 week after my encounter with Lady, I began investigating the servants' wing. This is the oldest part of the school, where servants once lived. It's currently used as storage, but at night it shows a different face. The servants' wing is connected to the main building by a narrow corridor. Even during the day, it's dimly lit and humid. Stains emerge on the walls, and the floorboards make eerie sounds with every step. However, this is during the day. At night, strange sounds echo from the servants' wing. Sounds as if a large number of people are working. The sound of washing dishes, footsteps, and sometimes even conversation like voices can be heard. but there isn't a single living person among them. Driven by curiosity, I tried to determine the source of these sounds one night. Carrying a flashlight, I headed to the servants' wing. As I approached, the sounds gradually grew louder. They certainly sounded like people were there. The sound of plates clinking, water flowing, and faint laughter. However, the moment I stepped into the servants' wing, all sounds stopped. As if they had noticed my presence, complete silence fell. The flashlight illuminated the old kitchen. Dust-covered cooking utensils, rusted pots, broken plates. Everything told the story of not being used for decades. But strangely, a warm smell wafted from somewhere. It was like freshly baked bread, yet mixed with something else, a complex aroma. As I proceeded deeper, I discovered several footprints on the floor. However, they weren't from modern shoes, but appeared to be traces of old-fashioned leather shoes. And those footprints suddenly disappeared in the center of the room. At that moment, I heard the sound of a door quietly closing behind me. When I turned around, the door I had entered through was closed. I rushed to the door, but the knob wouldn't turn. It seemed to be locked from the inside. As I began to panic, I swung my flashlight around looking for another exit. However, the servants' wing had a maze-like structure, and every door was similarly closed. Then, the sounds began again. This time, they came from right near me. The sound of washing dishes, chopping vegetables, pots being placed on stoves. But when I shone light on the sources, nothing was visible. Invisible people were busily working around me. Most terrifying were the occasional voices. They were speaking in Old English. I couldn't make out the content, but I could definitely tell they were having conversations. And occasionally my name was called.
Richard.
A faint woman's voice whispered.
Stay here. Forever.
I desperately searched for another exit. Finally, I found an old service door. The rusted key miraculously turned, and I was able to escape outside. When I looked back, warm light was leaking from the servants' wing windows, as if a large number of people were working inside, but it was only for a moment, and soon it returned to its original darkness. Afterward, I researched the servants' wing. According to old records, a fire occurred in this wing in the 1920s, claiming the lives of 12 servants. They were overcome by smoke and died having lost their escape routes. Their souls continue working there even now. Just as in life, they serve their invisible master, and occasionally they try to add living people to their ranks, to make them work alongside them forever. If you hear sounds from the servants' wing in the middle of the night, never go to investigate. They are waiting for you, to make you a new companion, unable to leave that place for eternity. Through my experience in the servants' wing, my suspicions became certainty. Ladies' words, the music heard from the ballroom, the temptation of the red door, and the servants' labor. These were definitely not coincidences. Everything was moving under some greater intention. However, I still needed time to understand the full picture, and fate would finally show me the answer. 3 weeks after my encounter with Lady, I would finally solve all the mysteries. That night was October 31st, Halloween night. Ironically, the students had been looking forward to this night. They had finished their costume party and returned to the dormitories, continuing to chat in their excited state. I was making my rounds later than usual. The clock showed 8:45 p.m. On my way to the second school building, I noticed the first anomaly. Warm light was leaking from a building that should normally have had its heating turned off. Looking through the windows, it appeared as if some kind of gathering was taking place inside. But no such event was scheduled. 8:50 p.m. I entered the building. Though the heating should have been turned off, The interior felt abnormally warm, and I could faintly hear music, the strains of a waltz. Beautiful, nostalgic music as if flowing from an old gramophone. 8:55 p.m. The music grew louder. I walked through the school building searching for the source of the sound. The music seemed to be coming from the upper floor. However, as I climbed the stairs, discordant notes began mixing with the music. Slightly off-key tones that soiled the beautiful melody, as if the instruments were out of tune. 8:58 p.m. The servant's footsteps began. At first, it was a faint sound from far away, but it rapidly approached. Multiple footsteps were echoing from different directions, surrounding me. They were appearing earlier than usual, as if they knew this was a special night. 8:59 p.m. I saw her figure at the far end of the corridor. Lady. Tonight, she appeared more vivid than ever. She had a presence as if she possessed physical form, and she was walking toward me, slowly but surely. Her appearance at this time was unusual. Normally, she only appeared between 2 and 3 a.m. Something had changed. At that moment, I realized something. Her footsteps, the servant's footsteps, and the ballroom music were creating perfect harmony, like an orchestra that had rehearsed together for years. This was no coincidence. Everything was calculated and coordinated. 9 p.m. Everything began. With the chiming of bells, the entire school transformed. But it wasn't a sudden change. It was like a giant creature that had been sleeping for a long time slowly awakening. The walls pulsed, the floor breathed, and the ceiling gave low groans. The ballroom music became a thunderous roar, and the servants' footsteps dominated the entire building. And from far away, I heard the sound of a heavy door being opened. The red door. In that moment, I understood. These phenomena had never been independent. Lady, the servants, the ballroom ghosts, and the entity beyond the red door. They were all working in coordination, like individual instruments in a massive orchestra, each playing their role. And the conductor of that orchestra was the school itself. I finally understood the truth. This building is not merely a collection of stone and timber. It is one giant consciousness. And Lady, the servants, and the ballroom ghosts were merely organs of that consciousness. Eyes, hands, and voice. And we are all just puppets dancing within that massive consciousness. When I woke up, I was in the caretaker's room bed. Outside the window, it was already bright. However, it was different from an ordinary morning. The light was strangely dim, as if fog had settled over everything. Looking at the clock, it was past 7 a.m. However, I could hear no birdsong from outside, nor the voices of students. It was a silence, as if all sound had vanished from the world. I tried to stand up, but my body felt heavy and wouldn't move as I wanted. I tried to remember what happened last night, but my memory was hazy. However, there was one thing I remembered clearly. I had seen Lady's face. No, to be precise, I had seen that she had no face. At that moment, there was a knock at the door, a light sound. Perhaps one of the students? I opened the door. No one was there. However, a letter had fallen in the hallway. It was written in beautiful cursive script on old parchment. I picked it up and began to read.
Dear Richard Gray, last night you saw something you should not have seen. You learned something you should not have known. However, this was not by chance. You were chosen. This school has a long history. And within that history, someone like you was needed. As a caretaker, as a guardian, and as a witness. For 10 years, you have faithfully performed your duties. Thanks to you, we have been able to sleep peacefully. However, the time has come. The time for you to become one of us. Tonight at 9 p.m., you must make a choice. Accept or flee. However, do not think you can escape. No one has ever escaped from this school. We are waiting for you. Lady M.
When I finished reading the letter, my hands were trembling. Lady M? I recognized those initials. I had seen them in the school's historical documents. I hurried to the archive room. However, as I walked down the hallway, I noticed something strange. The school building, which should have been bustling with students, was completely silent. I looked into the classrooms, but no one was there. It was as if the entire school had been emptied. I understood now. For these 10 years, there had been subtle inconsistencies in the daily life I had been witnessing. The students' laughter sometimes looped. I heard the same conversations repeatedly. The calendar dates sometimes contradicted each other. I had dismissed these as mere memory lapses. However, the truth was far more terrifying. The school had been gradually manipulating my perception, blurring the boundary between reality and illusion. Like a frog being boiled in gradually heated water, I had been made to adapt to an abnormal world without realizing it. For 10 years, I had been living within an elaborately constructed stage set. When I reached the archive room, I witnessed an even stranger sight. The bookshelves, usually neat and organized, were in disarray as if someone had frantically searched for something, and scattered on the floor were old photographs. I gathered up the photographs. They were all old pictures of the school. Photos from the 1920s and 1930s. Group photos of students, faculty photos, school event photos. However, among them was one photograph that froze my blood. It was a faculty photograph from 1934. In it were Dr. Pemberton, the current principal, and the teachers I saw every day. But this was impossible. The people in a 1934 photograph couldn't still be at the school in 2024, looking exactly the same. I stared intently at the photograph. There was no mistake. Dr. Pemberton's distinctive goatee, Ms. Harrington's sharp gaze, Mr. Blackwood's elegant posture. Everything was the same, completely unchanged from 90 years ago. At that moment, I heard a voice behind me.
You seem surprised, Richard.
I turned around to find Dr. Pemberton standing there. He wore his usual gentle smile. However, that smile now looked terrifying. This photograph, I said in a trembling voice.
A nostalgic photograph. It's from when we were young.
Dr. Pemberton took the photograph in his hand.
Though I wonder how much meaning the concept of young has for us.
What does this mean?
Richard, you have been a good caretaker. A very good caretaker. However, the time has come. The time to know the truth.
Dr. Pemberton's eyes looked different from usual. Deep, dark, like bottomless swamps. And when I realized it, I could see the faces of other teachers overlapping in the depths of his pupils. Miss Harrington, Mr. Blackwood. No, that was wrong. They were all different aspects of the same existence.
This school is not an ordinary school. We are not ordinary teachers. And soon, you two will no longer be an ordinary human being.
I backed away. However, there were bookshelves behind me. There was no escape.
There is nothing to fear. The pain lasts only an instant. And after that, eternal peace awaits.
At that moment, the clock chimed, the bell announcing noon. However, it was not the usual clear sound. It was heavy, dull, like a funeral bell. Dr. Pemberton approached me, and then I noticed the change in his face. His outline began to blur, becoming indefinite like mist. I screamed and ran out of the archive room. I ran down the hallway, rushed down the stairs, and headed for the main entrance. However, the door wouldn't open. As if it were sealed from the outside, it wouldn't budge. I could hear footsteps behind me. Multiple footsteps. The teachers were chasing me. No, the things that had been teachers. I ran around looking for another exit. However, no door, no window would open. The school was completely cut off from the outside world. And then I understood. I would never be able to leave this school. And tonight, at 9 p.m., I would have to make a choice. However, it wasn't really a choice. The outcome was already decided. I had hidden myself in the principal's office because it was the only place they wouldn't enter. However, I knew it was only a matter of time. As evening approached, the atmosphere of the entire school was changing. The air became heavy, the shadows deepened, and even the flow of time seemed distorted. Looking at the clock, it was 8:30 p.m. In 30 minutes, the school's real time would begin. For the past 10 years, I had spent these 30 minutes every night in terror. But tonight was different. Tonight was the night I would become part of that time. While examining the old desk drawers in the principal's office, I discovered a hidden drawer. Inside was an old diary recording the school's true history. The diary began in the 1920s. The first page was written in beautiful cursive script.
October 31st, 1923. The ritual is finally complete. Lady Margarita's soul has merged with the school and become its eternal guardian. Through her sacrifice, we have found a way to transcend death. However, the price is great. Every year, fresh blood is needed. The soul of a living human is necessary to maintain this contract. From now on, we shall establish the position of caretaker. They will serve the school for 10 years, and at the end of the 10th year, they will be forced to choose. Become one of us, or. However, no one has ever refused, because refusal is impossible. Dr. Algernon Pemberton, Principal, Hartwell Academy.
My hands trembled. In a diary from 1923, the same name as the current principal was written, and the handwriting was exactly the same as the principal's handwriting I had seen many times. In the margin of the diary was drawn a portrait of a beautiful woman. However, as I gazed into those eyes, I had the illusion that she was gazing back at me. Below the portrait, Margarita was written in beautiful cursive script. At that moment, the scent of roses filled the room. Even though it was October, somehow there was the sweet fragrance of roses. Opening the next page revealed even more terrifying facts.
October 31st, 1933. We performed the ritual for the first caretaker, Thomas Whitman. He resisted until the end, but was powerless before Lady Margarita's strength. He now serves us in the servants' quarters. Forever. We have hired Harold Greenfield as the second caretaker. He does not know his predecessor's fate. There is no need for him to know. In 10 years, he will meet the same fate.
I felt as if I couldn't breathe. I understood the true identity of them working in the servants' quarters. They were former caretakers, people who had served the school for 10 years and then became part of the school forever. Turning more pages, I found a list of successive caretakers. Harold Greenfield 1933 to 1943, Robert Morrison 1943 to 1953, William Lancaster 1953 to 1963, James Fitzpatrick 1963 to 1973, David Ashworth 1973 to 1983, Michael Thornton 1983 to 1993, Samuel Blackburn 1993 to 2003, Edward Cunningham 2003 to 2013, and in the 2013 entry, my name was written. Richard Gray 2013 to 2023. However, the 2023 part had been crossed out and rewritten as 2024. At that moment, I heard strange footsteps in the hallway. But they were not human footsteps. Something was approaching with a dragging, wet sound. I quickly hid the diary in the desk drawer and held my breath. The footsteps stopped in front of the principal's office, then moved away. I took out the diary again and opened the last page. There was writing that appeared to have been written recently.
October 30th, 2024. Richard Gray is an excellent caretaker. However, last night, he saw something he should not have seen. We need to accelerate the timeline. Tonight, we will perform the ritual. Lady Margarita is awakening from her 100-year slumber. She seeks a more powerful soul. Richard's soul is perfect. Through 10 years of faithful service, his soul has become deeply connected to the school. The preparations for the ritual are complete. Beyond the red door, she waits.
If you are hearing this story, if there is such a person, remember just this one thing. There is always a reason behind job advertisements that are too good to be true. At that moment, the last page of the diary turned by itself. There, words that had just been written appeared.
Richard, you are reading this, aren't you?
I threw the diary away. However, I heard a voice, not from the diary. It was a voice echoing from the entire room.
It is useless to try to escape. This school has become part of you, and you have become part of the school.
It was Lady's voice. Lady Margarita's voice.
You have been chosen as someone special. The other caretakers became mere servants. But you are different. You will become my companion. Forever.
The temperature in the room dropped sharply. My breath turned white. The smell of old paper and mold disappeared, replaced by the sweet fragrance of roses that filled the room. And in the corner of the room, a shadow appeared. It had the shape of a person, but I couldn't see its face.
There is nothing to fear. There is no pain. There is only eternal love.
The shadow approached. I sat in my chair, unable to move. I was paralyzed with fear.
All your predecessors resisted at first, but in the end, they all accepted, because it is the only way.
Looking at the clock, it was 8:55 p.m. Outside was beginning to darken. Soon it would be 9 p.m., the time when my fate would be decided.
It is time, Richard. Time to choose. However, you have already made your choice. To remain at this school. You have made this choice every day for 10 years. Tonight, you will simply make that choice eternal.
From the distance, beautiful waltz music began to play, a nostalgic, beautiful melody like a music box. I could hear the sound of the clock hands moving, tick, 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 like the beating of my heart.
The red door is open. I am waiting for you. Come, Richard, to your true home.
At that moment, bells rang throughout the school. The bell announcing 9 p.m. However, tonight's bell was different. It rang 12 times, as if announcing midnight. I stood up. There was no longer any choice. But strangely, the fear was fading. Instead, I felt a strange sense of relief, as if I had finally come home after a long journey. What I had instinctively feared for these 10 years. Perhaps it was actually what I had unconsciously been seeking. My feet began to move on their own. Out of the principal's office, down the hallway, toward the red door. In the hallway, the successive caretakers were seeing me off. I couldn't see their faces, but I could definitely feel their presence. And they all seemed to be thinking the same thing. Welcome, one who will become our companion. You are now hearing the end of my story. But is this really the end? I don't know either, because I cannot be certain where I am now, or when I am telling this story. I remember standing before the red door. The door was already open, and from beyond it, a gentle light was shining. It was not a terrifying light. It was warm, inviting light. Before crossing through the door, I looked back one last time, and I thought, if there is someone listening to this, there is something I must convey. The moment I crossed through the door, I understood. What I had been fearing all along was actually love. Lady Margarita's love, the school's love, and love for the eternal bond that would continue forever. Beyond the door was a beautiful room. An elegant, luxurious room like a 19th century aristocratic ballroom. Chandeliers cast gentle light, and portraits hung on the walls. They were all portraits of people connected to the school's history, founders, principals, and successive caretakers. In the center of the room, she was waiting, Lady Margarita. However, she was not the terrifying, faceless entity. She was a beautiful woman, but her beauty was too perfect. Not human beauty, but the cold beauty of a marble sculpture, and in the depths of her eyes, I saw the death throes of countless souls reflected, the successive caretakers, and countless students.
Welcome, Richard. I have been waiting for you for a long time.
Her voice rang out beautifully like an angel's. However, beneath that beautiful voice, I heard the screams of countless people hidden.
You have been a wonderful caretaker. And from now on, as my companion, you will protect this school forever.
I said nothing in reply. No, there was no need to reply. My heart had already decided. When she took my hand, I felt complete peace. Fear, anxiety, pain, everything disappeared. But at the same time, I felt something dying within me. My humanity, my free will, quietly fading away. However, you might wonder why I am telling you this story. If I truly became Lady Margarita's companion and became part of the school, why can I speak to you, an outsider? The answer is simple. Because I haven't completely crossed over to the other side yet. I am now on the boundary line, on the boundary between the living and the dead, between reality and illusion, between past and present. And I have one more thing I must do. That is to find the next caretaker. Having heard this story, you will surely think, what a terrifying story, or I would never want to go near such a school. But is that really so? Hartwell Academy is now recruiting a new caretaker. The salary is surprisingly good, housing is provided free, and the work is never difficult. Just manage, clean, and maintain the school, and follow a few simple rules. Do not go out after 9 p.m. Do not approach the red door. Do not speak to the lady. Do not enter the servants' quarters. Simple enough, isn't it? Am I warning you, or am I inviting you? I don't know myself, because I am no longer completely myself. My will and the school's will have become mixed together. However, there is one thing I can say with certainty. If you ever apply for this job, please observe carefully from the first night. The school's atmosphere, sounds, shadows, and above all, changes in yourself. Because the changes begin from the first day. Without realizing it, you become part of the school. And after 10 years, no, perhaps 10 years won't even be necessary. Where are you reading this story? Perhaps after seeing a job advertisement? Please look at the clock. What time is it now? If it's approaching 9 p.m., if you're beginning to hear ballroom music outside, you are already part of our world. Welcome to Hartwell Academy. We are waiting for you.